Welcome, everybody. It is Dr. Vibe, host and producer of the award winning Dr. Vibe show. As always, I'd like to say you're blessed, highly favored, a magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. I am the host of Epic Conversations, and this is the home of Epic Conversations. And please also note that I'm the 2018 award winner of the Innovation handed out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. And remember, you're blessed, highly favored, magnet for miracles, and a solution for someone's problem. And you may hear some music in the background. And what's really outstanding, our new friend knew the album that this is from. And we just lost her for a moment. Oh no, hopefully she's going to be back. So it is Seanne N. Murray. And we just lost her for a second. Hopefully she'll be back, but I'm going to have this music play for a little bit. And a little background on Ms. Murray, as saying that she's going to reconnect with us. She was born in Detroit, raised in Westport, Connecticut, and educated in Washington, D.C. and Philadelphia. She's always known as SNM, the voice for good. Aspired to be a writer at the early age of 7. She's authored several publications, including her first book, The Art of Submission, The Women's Guide to Fulfillment. She was an editor of the Political and Civil Rights Law Review at Temple University School of Law, and chaired a panel on clean drinking water at Harvard Law School. Since 2001, following the terror she endured on 9/11, she's been devoted to exploring and understanding the interconnections, oneness, and, as she calls it, of humanity. She's a founder of Seanne N. Murray Enterprises, LLC, 90 Minutes of Solutions, the Ara Initiative, and the writer, creator, and executive producer of the upcoming feature film, Chicago 1919. When she gets back in, she will be discussing Chicago 1919 with us tonight. It's about the Chicago race riot in 1919. It was a major racial conflict that began in Chicago, Illinois on July 27, 1919, and ended on August 3rd. During the riot, 38 people died and over 500 were injured. It was considered the worst of the approximately 25 riots during the Red Summer, so named because of the violence and fatalities across the nation. The combination of prolonged arson, looting, and murder made it the worst race riot in the history of Illinois. So we are waiting to get Ms. Murray back online with us. And we are on a number of different platforms. And if you have any comments, please share them with us. So we're looking to get Sean back on. And she just said, yes, lost you. So I'm asking her to refresh and reconnect. And as we play the music in the background, as I said, I've never used it on a video stream before, a live stream, and this is the first time I'm using it. And before we went live, I asked Sean if she knew the song. She knew the song, she knew the album. So we are expecting and speaking it that she's going to come back on. So I'd just like to thank people who are on different platforms. I have people on Periscope, Amir El Kara, and there's another viewer on Periscope. Thanks so much. We're just waiting for Sean to reconnect.
Okay, here I am. Here I am. Can you hear me?
Can hear you.
Okay, excellent. There we go. And yes, I hear you.
So we are good. And Sean, we can just jump right in. Okay. I gave your wonderful background to everybody. So
thank you.
We're all ready to go. Thank you for taking time out of your positive, productive schedule. And let's get right to it. Wonderful, beautiful bio. But tell us the early days of Sean, where you grew up, life growing up, etc.
So I was born in Detroit, Michigan, and I was only there until I was just about 4. The Detroit background is that my grandmother, Rosalind Murray, founded the Michigan Institute for Child Development, where she had 7 campuses educating kids from 1st through 12th grade. And do you know the poem Invictus by William Henley? So every kid in the school, including the 7-year-olds, could recite with vigor the poem Invictus, which I always thought was pretty amazing. In fact, that was something I didn't even learn until later in life when I was reciting the poem at an event. And then my uncle told me that all the kids in all of her schools had knew it, wrote. And then her sister, who's my great aunt, is the co-founder of
What?
Motown, who signed. Yeah.
What?
So she literally signed Stevie Wonder
Oh
to
my God.
Motown. She taught Smokey Robinson musical theory. She created the whole like etiquette thing. She even created the publishing company that was sold for, whatever, hundreds of millions of dollars and all that. Yeah. And she had perfect pitch. So it's an interesting family. And, that it was like that side of the family moved to Bel Air and focused on entertainment. And my side of the family moved to the East Coast and focused on education and business. And we literally never crossed paths until I did about 5-6 years ago when I lived in LA for a while. But after Detroit, we went to Ohio, then to Massachusetts. And then most of the time I grew up actually in Connecticut, in Westport, Connecticut.
How cool is that? Motown in your roots.
Yeah.
That is fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Coming from such an incredible family, did you realize how incredible your family was at a younger age?
You know what? My side of the family didn't consider that part of their family so incredible.
What? No problem.
To tell you the And it wasn't like we didn't think that they were incredible. It was just like it was what it was, and it wasn't really a big deal. It was kind of like I said, it was like, I think my family was like, oh, those entertainer people, and then my side was, like I said, about like education and business. So they were very divided. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
And it just wasn't a big deal. And I remember seeing like headshots of some of my cousins and whatever, but it didn't really mean anything to me.
Did it, with the families being so, I guess, lack of a better word, on different ends of the spectrum, did it affect you in any way, or did you just keep on being Seanne and just focusing on doing what you had to do?
Yeah, well, I start being Seanne. We'll get being Seanne until I was at least 35. I did what my do, and I did what was expected of me or was it. I was literally like I was the perfect child. If you said do it, I did it. If you said don't do it, I didn't do it. And I'm the oldest grandchild too.
Okay. And how much did your family? I can hear you. There's a little bit of
Is
delay,
there a
but I
delay?
can
Can
hear
you
you.
hear me?
How much was education stressed?
Okay. Okay. Oh, education was number one. It was the number one priority. And the only thing that was acceptable was to get straight A's. Nothing was, you had to achieve, and it had to be exceptional. And, my grandmother taught that in her schools with the kids that she taught. It's not necessarily how she raised my father, but in our household, it was all about excellence. And, I maintained that literally from a little kid, up until now. I mean, I've finally started to like relax a little bit in certain ways that my parents probably wouldn't really appreciate or approve of, you know what I mean? Even today. But I got straight A's in school. If I got like an A minus, it would be like, well, why did you get an A minus in geometry? Like it was a big
How
deal,
did
and it
you
was
handle
very, very
that?
upsetting to me.
Some people
Yeah,
say
that would
pressure. Some
crush
people
my
would
little
say that
heart. It really would.
challenge. How did you handle it growing up?
Yeah, that's interesting. I think for me, I'm trying to think, was it a challenge? Yeah, I guess I felt that it was both. I was the kid who, yeah, you're right. I think I did think of it as a challenge at that time. Like there was, nothing that I couldn't do. I just knew I could do it. So I went and did it, but still not to be applauded for the good things that I did was very, very, very painful. And even, today, I don't appreciate negative reinforcement as a way of learning, and I don't operate that way myself. I do appreciate positive enforcement for what I do, and I work on giving other people positive enforcement, because that was not something that I enjoyed. It was really quite painful. And I was extraordinarily successful. I mean, I went to Howard University on a full academic scholarship, and I even went to law school on an academic.
Congratulations on that. And actually, that's something that yourself, myself, and Dr. Tachi, who introduced me to yourself, because both of you went to Howard, and my father is a graduate of Howard University.
That's right.
HU. So how did that happen? And was that you driven or parent driven?
Yeah, you mentioned that. HU.
Yeah, how much was that you?
You mean that I got an academic scholarship? No. I had the grades, and it just happened. I mean, I didn't apply for it or anything. I just had good SAT scores, and I had great grades. I was in the top, whatever it was, top 10% of my class in Westport, Connecticut. And, it just was what it was. I got a whole bunch of offers, actually. That wasn't the only one. I was offered a scholarship at University of Michigan, and I chose Howard.
Growing up in Connecticut at that time.
Yeah, it was, it's funny because I have probably some different views on it now, being able to look back on it. But it was, my parents, again, they're from Detroit. So if you think about it, they were, I was born in the late 60s. And so that means my parents experienced, like the riots in Detroit and all that. And so I think funny enough, and we'll come to that later on when we talk about the film, I'm just actually realizing a connection. So I'm glad you asked that question.
Wow.
But, the way that they raised me was that white people could not be my friend. And that that if they were behaving as my friend, that it wasn't real, and that they wanted something from me. And that the only people that I could really depend on were my parents. So to answer your question, felt pretty isolated. And I didn't really think I had real friendships. Though when I look back on it, I see that I was actually well-liked. Like I didn't even know that I was well-liked until many, many years later. Hold on one second. Adrian, I can actually see you on the camera.
You're growing up days till the mid-30s.
Just a little. But go ahead. I'm sorry, Dr. Rod.
What sort of experiences do you remember from that time until your mid-30s, till you made a turn, so to speak?
Yeah, so I continued to just sort of follow protocol. So, I have this amazing resume, and the things that I did are things that a lot of people would try to do. And I wasn't even trying to do them. They would just show up. So it was like, hey, I practiced law at first. So I went to Temple Law School, and I, took the New Jersey and the Pennsylvania bar exams, practiced law for a little while in Philadelphia. And then I was offered a position by Reggie White, who played for the Eagles at that time, to be the chief operating officer of his nonprofit housing development company. So I did that for, I don't know, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. And then I went to Wall Street. And when I went to Wall Street, I didn't even know what Wall Street was. So literally what happened, it's so true. What happened was, and and I do still today believe in saying yes and exploring things. That's definitely something I have carried through all that time. So, a friend of mine who had gone to Duke Business School, to Fuqua, we were just talking one day, and he had always been all about Wall Street. He was trying to get a job at Goldman Sachs, which is, still today very difficult, but extraordinarily difficult if you're an educated Black man to get a job at Goldman Sachs. And at that time, Deutsche Bank, which is a big German bank, had just kind of was trying to get a stronghold in the US, and they hired a whole bunch of people from Goldman Sachs. And this was during the time when mortgage-backed securities was really big. So, you know, before all that whole big mortgage thing. So there was a guy from Goldman Sachs who was a like super like hotshot black guy who had gone to Stanford and MIT, and they paid him, you know, multi-millions of dollars to come over. And he hired my friend as his assistant. Okay. Because this is how Wall Street works. You don't just get to like roll up. You have to know how to make coffee, you know? So he had to be his assistant for a year. And then in order for him to move on and take the actual position he wanted, a seat on the trading desk, he told him he needed to find a replacement as good as him. And so literally one day we were just randomly talking on the phone, and he was telling me that. And I was like, oh, so what is it? what is it about? What do you do on Wall Street? You know, and he told me about it. I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. Wow. I said, I might be interested in that. So he said, cool. So he gives the guy the resume. I go to New York, I interviewed, and I got the job, and I worked as his assistant. So I worked as the assistant to the managing director for mortgage-backed securities for Deutsche Bank. And I committed to him that I would do that for 1 year, being his assistant, which was annoying as all get out. I mean, when I say assistant, what it is it's being his secretary. And it was like mailing his stuff and talking to his girlfriends, and just ridiculousness. But I said I would do it for a year. And while I was doing that, it gave me a chance to be exposed to Wall Street, to see what it was about. And then I was able to market myself to the managing directors at the firm until I got my own position on the trading floor. Oh, wow, that's funny. No one's ever asked me that question. At that time, I may have been the only one. And I don't even remember. Maybe there was someone else, but I don't recall. I mean, I don't remember, but there must have been somebody else. I just don't remember. I just don't remember right now. Yeah, but there definitely was not more than from your experience 3 or anything like that. You know, law, from not in that kind of a position.
Organization, from going to Howard University, Temple University. What were the things that you carried from those experiences, and was it something different in each experience? And if you do remember anything that you can share with our audience, because I'm going to shout out right now, Miss Shannon, thank you so much for stopping by. If you want to join the conversation, Sean and I would love you to join in. But yeah, because you've had so many varied experiences, and there's actually another thing I'll ask after that. But what were some of the things you learned or carried on that you still carry with you today?
Yeah, well, I think all of them, and I will tell you a story that's an interesting story about my first job at the law firm. All the things that carry through are what we were talking about a few minutes ago, which is focusing on excellence, having high expectations of myself and others, and expecting or accepting nothing less than the best from myself and the people around me, and also not being demeaned or discriminated against. So, you know, when I worked my first legal job, I worked at a big firm in Philadelphia, and I was fortunately there were 2 other Black people at that firm, and one, as a matter of fact, he used to run, I believe, the SEC. His name is Al Dandridge. And Al actually is the man who signed me into the bar, which I think is so cool. And funny enough, his son, we follow each other on Facebook now. And I was just telling him the other day, did he know that his father actually signed me into the bar, which he actually didn't know that, but he thought it was, you know, super cool. But so my first day at the law firm, you know, you come in with a group of associates. So we're all first year out of law school, just as fresh as we can be. You've taken the bar exam at this point before you start, but you're waiting for your bar exam results to come through. They don't come through until, I can't remember then, like September or something. So anyway, first day on the job, we have our little orientation. I go into my office. Now I literally had a full on office, on Market Street in the Mellon Bank building. Go into my office, and the managing partner came into my office and sat down, closed the door and sat down. And he said, so, our policy here is that you're going to be sharing a secretary with a senior partner. That's how it worked. Each associate shared a secretary with a senior partner. And you're sharing it with so-and-so, who's our senior most litigator. And this guy was like a head litigator in the city. And his secretary had been with him for like 20 something years. And I can't remember her name, but he said, and she has let us know that she does not want to work for a Black female attorney. Yes. So this is my very first day on the job. And this is what he's saying to me. And so I'm like, okay. So, right. What I'm thinking in my mind is like, this is crazy, right? But I'm like, okay. But at the same time, I'm like, okay, I got this. And this comes from kind of what you're asking me, from how I was trained, how I grew up. So I was like, okay, I got it. So what I knew that I needed to do at that point was keep records. And I also knew now that I was at a disadvantage to my peers, because now I have, and this is a time when we're still using dictaphones, and, you're really relying on your secretary to do some real work. And so I start keeping records. Every time I give her an assignment, I'm checking the time to see how long does it take her to get it to me. And if I feel that it's too long, I start making reports to her supervisor. And so one day she rolls up into my office and stands at the door and says, "Oh, I hear you've been complaining about my work." And I said, yes, as a matter of fact, I have. And then she says something else. And I said, well, you know what? Let's just cut to the chase. I said, the bottom line is you don't want to work for a Black female attorney. Is that accurate? She says, yes, that is accurate. I said, good. Let's call your supervisor and reiterate that right now. So I dialed her supervisor's number on speakerphone. She's not there. So I said, you know what? Let's just call the managing partner of the firm. So I dialed the number and he picks up. I said, Steve, so-and-so is here. She would like to reiterate to you that she does not want to work for a Black attorney. So I think you should come to my office. Now, mind you, I'm a first-year associate, right? It's like funny for me to even tell this story how did I even know how to handle this? But this is how I was raised. So he came to my office, and bottom line is that this woman who had been with this attorney for 25, 30 years was fired that day. She was out.
Think so.
Yeah, she was out. Yeah, and I bet you no other secretary ever messed with me ever again. Yeah, yeah. And you know what that really comes from? That comes from, when I was in school, I remember I had this history teacher. And by the way, my mother was a teacher. She was a teacher and a guidance counselor. So we had a close connection in terms of my, education at all times. But, I had written a report and got, I think, an A- on the report. And the report didn't have any markings on it. So I was like, well, why did I get an A-? It's not minus, it's an A, right? So I make an appointment and I go meet with the guy. And I said, you gave me an A-. What's wrong with it? So he looks at it and he's like, no, you're right. It's an A. I'm like, great, mark that up and let's keep it going. Yeah. So it's, you have to, it's so, your question was what has the learning, what the learnings have been and what my experiences have been. That really, that's really practicing the things that my parents taught me. That's what that's about. Yeah. And you have to do that as a Black person then, and even now. In my young days in kindergarten, when they put me in the lowest reading group, and my mother was like, "What?" My mother goes to the school and they test me, and I'm literally I'm reading to the class.
He was an educator for 38 years in the same public school. So.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Wow, that's amazing. Okay. So yeah, my Seanne, my triple great grandfather actually taught Booker T. Washington his ABCs. Yeah. I don't know. And I'm trying to remember what his name is right now, but I can't think of it. But I think it was West Virginia. He was the principal of all the Black people like in the state for like 30 years or
Well, I
something.
think
He
that
was in the
ancestry
Union
should fund you and
Army and
do a
all that
promo
stuff. And
commercial, by the way.
so I mean, education just runs in the blood. Oh, I would love for them to do my thing. I think I just saw that they announced their new
Henry,
people that they're doing this season, you know?
Henry Louis Gates.
You know, where the guy from Harvard, I forget what his name is. They announced the 6 people
Yes,
recently.
put it out there. And just want to
Exactly. I would love to do that.
platform.
So
Liz
let's
and
put
Bobby,
that out in
thank
the
you for
universe.
stopping by. It's appreciated, not taken for granted.
Yeah.
So when did you make the turn? Because you're doing all this corporate stuff, this, that, and then when did you decide to make a turn?
Yeah. So not until
Well,
I was like
when
in my
well,
30s
okay,
when
let's land on that.
I don't know if you
So let's talk
know that
about that.
I'm a 9/11 survivor. So okay. Well, I mean, so that is, you know, when you go through uh, I mean, it's not a tragedy, a terrorist event. When you experience I mean, I hate to say I experienced a terrorist event, you know, and that changes you. So it's led to a lot of things that I do now that I haven't even been conscious of until recently. And I think at some point it was something that pushed me to start thinking about, am I living the life that I want to live? And am I doing the things that I actually want to do? And so at one point, I literally felt like if I don't make a change right now and start focusing on the things that I want to do instead of doing the things that I think I'm supposed to do or that I think other people think I'm supposed to do, that I can't survive this way. And so I literally made a life or death decision because I was like, I can't go on this way. And so I decided at that
Okay.
point that I was going to go to Los Angeles. And so this was the first time those two sides of the family actually came together. And my intention in going to Los Angeles was to focus on my own creativity. I had already started writing a screenplay at that point called The Art of Submission. And my intention was to focus on that. But what happened was I was so programmed that when I got to LA, I continued that programming and I got sucked right back up into doing business things and really lost that little bit of focus, you know, that I had. And I stayed in LA for, I guess, 5 or 6 years. And I actually live in Miami right now. So literally it was like I fled Los Angeles so that because I was like, what am I doing? I was like, even though it was a different field, I had gotten caught up in the same thing again. And even worse, because I was spending my time and effort promoting other people's creativity. So, you know, the good thing is I learned a lot. I learned all about LA, things that are for sure invaluable today. And the process is the process, right? The process that we're supposed to go through is what we go through. And that's been mine. And so I literally fled LA so that I could fully immerse
And
myself in what I want to do and how I want to do it.
mm, mm.
And that was
Some
just a year
people
ago.
here, Shannon saying
And
shout out to
meanwhile, during that
Florida.
whole
Bobby
time,
says
I was
Florida has
always
that
creating.
laid back atmosphere, definitely. And I know that, and Shannon actually lives in Florida right now. She says she's going to miss it when she leaves.
Oh my God, yeah. I really feel like I would not want to leave here. For a minute, I thought I was going to leave here just a couple of months ago, and I really feel like it held me. And I live in Miami, by the way, and Miami is what I thought Los Angeles was going to be like. So Los Angeles is actually very boring, and it's very generic. Los Angeles is very generic, whereas Miami, it's like spicy and sexy, and the culture and the rhythm and the, you know, just every day you have this like sexy energy that just motivates everything. You know, it's really
Shannon is
amazing. You
asking
can have a mini
how long you've
vacation
been in
any time
Miami.
of the
So
day
it's
or night
you
in
said a
Miami.
year. Wonderful.
Yeah, just a little bit over a year. I moved here in July of last year. Yeah. But I love it. I love it, love it. This is my favorite place that I've lived so far. I would say other than New York. And the only thing is because I have no interest in living in the cold again. You know, it's fine to visit. It's fine to visit, especially if you know you're going back to the warm
Nice.
weather, you know.
Shannon
And
said
I
she
love
lived
like
in
the
Miami
hot
Beach for
ocean
4
instead of the cold
years.
ocean that they have in, you know, on the West Coast.
Well, I bet she does. So we're going to transition with our remaining
Oh,
time,
nice.
and
I
please
bet
note
you miss it.
with Seanne, and for those who caught the front end either live or on the replay,
Yeah.
she has done so many things, and I'm
Mhm.
asking her to come back on other times to focus on different areas of things that she's achieved. And as you've heard, she's done some outstanding stuff, and we want to make sure and give her the opportunity on different conversations to really focus deep down on some of these things. But today we're going to talk about Chicago 1919. And I'm going to be transparent as I always try to be my best. When she told me about this, I knew nothing about it. So, Seanne, can you give us some background on the Chicago race riots of 1919? No problem.
Sure. And let me just go back a tiny bit, if you don't mind, just into the genesis of what even got me to Chicago 1919. So during that time when I was in Los Angeles, I met a guy, his name is Jerry Levin, and Jerry's the former CEO of Time Warner, who literally like created HBO Boxing and People Magazine and put the Madonna book out. Like he's an icon in media. He was also involved in the whole AOL debacle, you know, back in the day. And while he was the CEO of Time Warner, his son was a school teacher in New York, and his son was shot in the head and killed. And Jerry and I met at the Hollywood Bowl in Los Angeles. In fact, the day we met, I had published an article in Elite Daily about an abortion that I had when I was in college. And I was getting all this feedback and from strangers, from women and girls who had abortions that were confiding in me, telling me their stories, some of them telling me things that they had never told anyone else. And I knew at that point that the work that I was doing held great responsibility. And that day I was thinking, I really wish I could talk to someone who kind of understands that responsibility. I felt like I really needed to engage with like a mentor in a way who could feel what I was feeling at this just precipice of moving into this arena of humanitarianism and advocacy. And so I met Jerry Levin, of all people, right? And he tells me this story. We just had this amazing bond that was like, it was like a fatherly, ancestral bond, honestly. That's how it felt. And when he told me about his son and how it completely devastated and impacted his entire life, I made a commitment to him that day, to his face, that I would do something to alleviate gun violence. And I'm maintaining that commitment. And you know, the thing that's interesting about really feeling the loss of gun violence with Jerry Levin is that Jerry was, you know, a very, you know, outrageously successful white man. And people like to think that gun violence only affects certain people. I think now people are more understanding with all these, you know, kids getting killed and everything, that it doesn't just affect one group of people. But then people, some of those things hadn't happened yet. And so that was an interesting way for me to start to focus on gun violence. And then shortly after that, the Alton Sterling shooting happened. And I kept watching that video. Oh, you know, I don't know if you remember how they just played it over and over. And I watched it every single time. And I was like crying. It was just watching this guy get killed for no reason. And I was like, okay, that's it. I can't let this happen and not do anything about it. And not only can I not let it happen, I have to be fully committed. And so I literally stopped doing everything that I was doing and became fully committed on doing something about gun violence. Whether to my detriment, resources, I didn't care. I was going all the way in. And I created this brand called Stop Stuff. And I created this logo and I, trademarked it and everything. It's a STOP, and the P is an upside down backwards gun like this. And I had these hats, and I was selling the hats to try to help support, nonprofits that are already doing good work. And I had a bunch of famous people doing it. Smokey Robinson was wearing the hat, and he did a whole video with me and all this stuff. And but it wasn't effective. And I was going back and forth to Chicago, so I was meeting all these nonprofits, meeting gang members and stuff like that. And people kept telling me I was going to get killed. And I was like, I'm not going to get killed, whatever. So anyway, that got me into that. And I was like, okay, this isn't working. I knew about this story that I'm going to tell you about, Chicago 1919. I was introduced to Rosanna Arquette, who's, the Arquette family is a iconic family in Hollywood. It's Rosanna Arquette, Patricia Arquette, David Arquette, and they are an activist and family. And so someone introduced me to Rosanna about this brand and this whole gun violence thing. We met at the Soho House in Beverly Hills. And I, in conversation, told her this story about Chicago 1919. And she's like, you need to write a treatment about this right away, like tonight, because this is a story that needs to be told. And I was like, you're right. And so I literally went home and started working on this treatment and shared it with her, and she loved it. And so now I'll tell you what Chicago 1919 is. So there's a period in 1919 that's known as, they call it the Red Summer of 1919, where there were almost 30 cities around the country where there were race riots during this summer. And I'm talking, like even in Washington, D.C., for instance, there was a 4-day race riot that was promulgated by fake news and even put in the newspapers. So it's very similar to some of the things we're experiencing today. So in that case, it was literally in the Washington Post. And what they would do was they would say that a black man had raped or tried to rape a white woman. And then literally like all hell would break loose for real. And I'm talking snipers, okay? So in Washington, D.C., like literally sniper on the top of the Howard Theater, who was black, by the way. Black and white people were killing each other. These are these stories that no one knows about. And then several days later, move to Chicago. And this young kid named Eugene Williams, he was 16 or 17 years old, black kid. He was on a makeshift raft at the 29th Street Pier, and he accidentally drifted to the white side of the water, which was, you're in the water. They had it segregated by custom, not by law. He drifts to the white side of the water, and the white people on the beach started to stone him, and they killed this kid. And yeah, they stoned and killed him. And I just found the one and only picture of Eugene that exists recently, and learned that he is buried in a cemetery in Chicago without a headstone, which is something that I have to do something about that. I can't have this kid out there, buried without even a marking that recognizes who he is or that he lost his life under these circumstances. And that led into 8 days of massive violence on the south side of Chicago. So, it was called the Black Belt. So you think of we're talking about where Obama, lives today, the south side of Chicago, 8 days. So imagine wherever you are right now, if there was just 8 days of violence in your neighborhood where Irish gangs, they called themselves the Hamburg Athletic Club, came and tried to kill all the black people and tried to burn that part of the city down. And anyone, if you're on your computers right now, if you Google Chicago 1919, you are going to see the south side of Chicago in absolute shambles. And I'm talking buildings obliterated, like literally down to the ground, being nothing but plywood. And that went on for, like I said, 8 full days. It didn't stop until the governor called in the militia, 6,500 strong. And even then, they tried to encircle the south side to prevent the fire trucks from going in. And there were some gruesome things that were done to black people there. Babies 8 months old with their heads smashed against telephone poles, things like that. Those are, and the reason, and by the way, so that's the backdrop for my screenplay. So There's never been a feature film done on this. Like you, most people, 99% of people do not and have not heard of this story. It's an extraordinary, important part of history, particularly at that time, and particularly in Chicago, where the war had just ended. So you had all these people coming back from the war. You had Black men coming back from the war who thought they were going to be respected now because they had fought for our country. And they were and, you know, by the way, during that time, the NAACP promoted Americanism. How about that? They didn't like hyphenated, like Black American, this American, that American. They wanted us all to be American, which I find very interesting. Wow. And by the way, Smokey Robinson has a great poem that he did about that, about being Black in America. But so they came back thinking they were going to be respected, which they weren't. You had tons of people that had migrated from Europe. And then you had Black people coming from the South in droves. Like pretty much every time there was like a major lynching, which was a lot, people would flee to Chicago because it was considered like the new Mecca of safety and prosperity. And the major newspaper at that time for Black people was called the Chicago Defender. And the Chicago Defender had a lot to do with this migration of people. It's almost like they were telling people, like, it's good here, you know, come to Chicago. And the Chicago Defender was known for its extraordinarily graphic details about the slaughter and murder and lynching of Black people all over the country. So the way this relates to gun violence, as I see it, is that it's important that, particularly for, you know, Black boys, young Black men who might be in gangs and who might be killing each other, to understand that the rage that they feel, which is, it's real, that rage is real, but it's misplaced. And so you're putting this rage out on your brothers and sisters or whatever, when the rage really comes from a place when you were trying to save your own life, you were trying to protect your families, you were trying to protect your neighborhood. But guess what? You don't even know this history. And why don't you know this history? Because this history isn't taught in, you know, public schools in the United States, because it's called Black history. This is American history. And, you know, going back to having gone to Howard University, you go to Howard University, you learn American history, which is inclusive of all races and cultures, as it should be in our public education system. Because when you know where you come from, it changes your psyche. Now you know who you are. When you're from Chicago and you know that Chicago was founded by a Black man, Chicago was founded by a Haitian. His name is DuSable. So when you could take some pride in that, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's funny. I never thought that I would be out here like this historian. Like in fact, I hated history until I went to Howard, funny enough. I just remember that because I never learned anything that I felt like was really, truly relevant to me.
We discussed the Red Summer of 1919 at length in high school. Well, you're probably a minority. Yeah, what high school was that, Shannon?
Wow.
Yeah, and she's saying 8 days.
What high school? Where did she grow up? What city?
Devastating stuff. Yeah, it's like and small Northeast Omaha. And New England, Omaha North. Sure. Is that New England, Omaha North High, Shannon? I don't know. Clarify that for us, Shannon. Like either come on, Omaha, Nebraska. Yes.
Omaha, Nebraska. She's saying. Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. I've never heard of such a thing. Hallelujah. That's good. That was a special kind of school, because that is literally the first that I've ever heard. I'm glad to hear it. I'm sure that had an impact on your life, knowing some of those stories too. And you know, so I say it's media and social enterprise to change the world. So that's what my focus is. It's really media, social enterprise, and events. So everything that I do, which sometimes may seem disparate on the surface, but everything I do is about promoting positivity, having a positive impact on people and the community. And this Chicago 1919 was announced a couple of weeks ago in Deadline Hollywood, which was a huge, huge deal. And Rosanna Arquette, who I mentioned earlier, is actually in the film. So she has a featured role in the film playing an Irish mother, actually. And her only request was that she not play a racist, because she's, she's not about that life. She doesn't even want to portray anything like that.
Yes.
And then my director, who some of you might know, and you should know, her name is Julie Dash. Julie is the first, you know who Julie is? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So Julie is the first Black woman to ever have wide distribution of a film in the United States called Daughters of the Dust, which is a very unique film. And yeah, classic. And for those who are more into modern day, if you look at Beyonce's Lemonade, and even if you Google Beyonce's Lemonade and Daughters of the Dust, there were many, many sections of that Lemonade video series that were an homage to Julie Dash's Daughters of the Dust, particularly when the women are like wearing those lace dresses and walking through the water, and the spiritual nature of that whole, Lemonade thing. So that was pretty cool. And so someone sent my treatment to Julie, and she read it. She's like, this is one of the best things I've ever read. This story has to be told. And she signed on as my director, like literally that day.
You shared your vision of Chicago 1919 with. Wow.
It was Rosanna Arquette. Yeah, because she's the one who encouraged me to do it, right? It was her. She was the one I told the story, and she's like, you've got to do this. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. So I did. So I shared the treatment with her first. She's like, great. And she has stuck with me all the way through. You know what I'm saying?
How you've been able to put yourself in environments of success, and also in environments with people who could level up whatever you were doing. And this is a perfect example with Rosanna Arquette leveling up a vision that you had. Well, what I'm saying is that taking it to...
Well, I never think of anyone leveling up anything of mine. I think of mine as equal. I know what you're saying, but I'm just letting you know I don't think of people that way. I wasn't raised, you remember you were talking about how I was raised? I just wasn't raised that way. I was raised that no one is better or worse than me. You know what I'm saying? So it's like when I talked to Rosanna, it just happened in conversation. So for instance, and we'll talk about it another time, but like Larry King was the headliner in an event that I did. And it wasn't even my idea to have Larry in it, but someone said, oh, Larry King would probably like this. You should talk to him. And I was like, yeah, that's a good idea. Do you know him? They're like, yeah. So I go meet Larry King for breakfast in Beverly Hills, this place where he has breakfast every day, everybody knows. And I sit with Larry King, and I told him what I was doing. And in 2 minutes, he said yes. And that's because I'm doing good stuff.
I'm not taking it as
you know what I'm saying? At all. And that has nothing to do with ego. It just is what it is. I'm good. He's good. You're good.
Manifest destiny. Right? Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
See, that's new. That part is new, I feel like. But I appreciate that. Yes.
You weren't truly manifesting your destiny. And then a turn has happened, and now you're manifesting your destiny.
A big turn. And, I'm glad you said that, because I haven't even realized it so much as I have realized it even in the last 2 months. I mean, you talk about manifest destiny. It's more than, it's just, I have reclined so fully into God that God is just holding me and showing me and bringing the people and the resources, and in a way that it's not even, I didn't even grow up that way. You know what I mean? No. It's just so clear right now. And so maybe you kind of picked up on that, even though we never even discussed it.
Yeah.
I'm right now, I've become like almost one of those, like, those people who are like on the corner with the Bible and stuff. I mean, I'm just like, so I'm like, oh, I mean, every single morning, every day, I thank God. And what I thank God for everything that I've been through, the good, the quote unquote bad, recognizing that nothing has been bad, that everything I've been through has led me to where I am, has made me who I am, has provided me with the internal resources and fortitude to do what I do. And then I thank God for everything that's coming my way, because I know it is. And I rely on him completely. And it's funny, I actually, I posted something the other day, because I used to be one of those people, when you're watching people on those award shows, you know, like this whatever rapper or singer, whatever, right? And they're like, first of all, I have to thank God. And I would be like, oh, God, please shut up. And now I'm like, absolutely. You know, like I didn't get it. I really didn't get it. But I get it. I get it now. I really, really get it now. And every single thing that I do has a purpose that is God driven. It's just
I'm looking
it's
at
true.
that right now.
It's true. And we all can. For anyone who's there, oh my God, I promise you, we all can. Message me if you have any doubts about it. We all can. And I'm telling you, I have never spoken this way in my life. My entire life has changed. And the way that happened is I had to literally release, let go, completely let go. Don't hold on to anything too tight. You got to be just like free to just let
Chicago
God work.
Journey
That's it.
Right now,
let God work.
Wow.
Where is it right now? So a couple of weeks ago, I signed an international distribution deal with a company called, oh, thank you. Yeah.
Sure.
You know, no. You know what? And I'm going to give just a piece of advice here. My best piece of advice is never wait, ever. So when someone says to you, oh, I'm going to do this, or oh, I'm going to do that, or oh, I'm going to get you that, just assume that they're not. And I don't even mean to put a negative on it, but just don't, if you wait for that person who said they're going to do X, Y, Z, and then you're still sitting there waiting and you haven't continued with momentum, then you're going to, first of all, you will have lost time and you might be pissed off. So that is also something that comes definitely from how I grew up. I don't wait for anything. I don't wait for anybody. I have had so many people promise me this and promise me that. And every time they did it, I'd be like, okay, sure, great. I would think to myself, all right, if they come through, great. But meanwhile, I'm on to the next. And so you cannot stop. When you're on a mission, you have goals. Don't ever depend on anyone else, because again, back to God, people will fail you, because they always do. And they're not even doing it on purpose. It just happens. So in terms of this moving, this forward motion, constant forward motion. And actually, my friend is probably watching this right now. The way this happened with Global Genesis Group, this was a social media story. So I don't know if we followed, I guess we followed each other on Instagram, and he posted something about a film that he's doing with, her name is Diane, I think it's Latiker, but I think I might be saying it wrong, who is involved, funny enough, with gun violence and gangs in Chicago. But it's a modern day story, and he's one of the, I think, executive producers of that story. And for some reason, I reached out to him about Chicago 1919. And he introduced me to Global Genesis Group.
And want to shout out to Global
and here we are. For, isn't that something? So social media actually does work.
On Twitter and also on my Facebook. What could you give a little shout out on what Global Genesis Group is all about?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's global distribution. So that means that once this film is completed, funded, produced, there's already a set outlet, a way to push the film out on an international scale. So where we are right now is I'm finalizing the last iteration of the script, and we're raising $10 million to do the film. So doing things like this, these conversations with you, the reason it's really important to me is because, first of all, so people can become familiar with the story, and then so that people who are just learning about the story, who have the resources to fund a project like this, now know about it. And there's so many people, you know, really all over the country. But if you look at people in Chicago, people who I feel would be interested, like Chance the Rapper, like Common, like Kanye, you know, who, when they find out that this extraordinary story is being told on the big screen for the first time, I hope that they'll have the same passion about getting the story out as I do.
Excellent. And I think we may have just lost Seanne audio-wise. Are you still there, Seanne? Okay, we've lost Seanne via audio, though we are still seeing her on the screen. Oh, there we go. Yeah, we're back. Good.
I'm here.
Good. Well, you know what? You're inspiring someone. So Shannon is saying.
Can you hear me?
That.
Okay, good.
Yes, I can. Yeah, Shannon is saying, now I'm going to write a poem about it. So inspiring. So you've already inspired another person about this.
Oh, Shannon, I'm a poet too. So share it with me. If you follow me on Instagram, I'm sure we'll put it up. But and another segment, we'll talk about my art of submission poetry, because I'm a poet and I do a lot of vocal poetry on my Instagram. So Shannon, I would love to see and hear your poem. And I want to say, I just see your note there about fluid like water. And that is so important because, and Dr. Vibe, you know, I have a whole water thing that we haven't even talked about yet. I have a nonprofit. The purpose, it's called focused on getting water to children in the U.S. But Shannon, I want to say, if you look at Isaiah 58, I believe it's verse 11, but I'm not sure. There's this line about water and about like having the springs of water that will never. The most inspirational thing that works for me from the Bible.
I'm just gonna see if I can. Yes, so you are correct again, just like you are with your music. The actual verse, Isaiah 58:11 says, "The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, and will strengthen your frame. You will be like a well-watered garden, like a spring whose waters never fail."
Like a spring whose waters never fail. Is that just fabulous? That's life. That's it. Like a spring whose waters never fail. As long as we fulfill our part of that deal too, which is to go out and help others. That whole Isaiah 58, it's about fasting, but it describes fasting as actually going out and brothers and sisters, the restorations, and in return, you have these water responsibility.
And Shannon is also quoting a verse, Matthew 6:33, "But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well."
That's right. That's right. Thank you, Shannon. Seriously, if you guys knew, you don't know me, so you think this is like my normal. It's my normal now. This was never me. This is never. But it is now.
And Shannon is.
My life, you know, I used to say, we didn't get a chance to really talk about 9/11.
Oh, Shannon is saying, your new normal, we are here for it.
Yes, it is my new normal. Absolutely. You know, I love it. Thank you, Shannon.
Okay, I'm going to ask a thing.
And I'm sure we'll talk.
No, go ahead. Yeah, because I know that your time is tight, but.
Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to know, would you be comfortable if I sent you Shannon's email address and you could communicate with her?
Absolutely. Okay. Yeah.
So Shannon, do me a favor, Shannon. Okay, no problem. I don't know if I have. Yep, I will do that. I will connect both of you up because I love it when things like this happen in real time. Sorry to interrupt. Tell me about, you were going to say something about 9/11.
To say that the post 9/11, as a matter of fact, I have this, I wasn't going to pull this up, but I just realized it's right here. This is actually one of my favorite books. It's called Oneness. Amazing, amazing book. Oneness after 9/11 in New York City, where there was just like rapturous love, just connection, compassion, eye to eye, face to face, like hand holding, hugging for like a few months. That's how it was in the city of New York. So I was like, wow, this is real, and this is what's possible. That, talk about life changing, that really changed my life. And I was talking recently, and I started to say what I normally, that's when I felt the greatest love that I've ever been. As I was, words were coming out of my mouth, I realized that the greatest love I've ever felt is exactly where I am right now. I'm experiencing the greatest love of my entire life right now.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. I think that we're going to end the conversation on that note. So, Ms. Seanne, I'd like to say thank you so much for taking the time to share with us today. Any final words do you have for us before we let you go?
As a matter of fact, passion. Be, you were a kid, that you wanted to do those things that excite you, feel good. Those are the same things that those that's now. So sometimes you might just be aware, remind yourself of what that is, who you are, what your true nature is, and as we'll talk about, I wrote a book called The Art of Submission, The Woman's Guide to Fulfillment. It's about,
Okay. So we have lost Seanne again. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wind down our conversation because it seems that her internet is kind of a little havoc. You know, we're just going to start winding down. So Sean Murray, that's all right. No problem. I can take care of the rest of this. But Sean Murray, he's got so many things to do. Chicago, 19, you know what? I lost my train of thought for doing it. 2019, he was at the Chicago Race Riot, and she was working on that. If you want to get in touch with her, you can go to her website, Sean, and that's SEANNE, N Murray Enterprises.com. You can also look up on Facebook, she's on Twitter at Seanne Murray, SEANNE, and then Murray, Murray. And if you want, check out the Dr. Vibe show. When I put up the replay of this, you'll see all her contact information. She will be returning for other stuff. As you said, if you've caught any part of this conversation, especially the front end, she has such an incredible journey and so many, as we like to say, knowledge bombs to share, from working on Wall Street to passing bar exams and, hanging out with Smokey Robinson. Go, if you go to her website, there's pictures of her and Smokey Robinson, pictures of her with Barry Gordy, in her lineage, in her heritage. Was it her mother or aunt or one of her female relatives co-founded Motown? Wow, that is huge. So please, 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 check her out, support, and I'm going to come to the end of this epic conversation by yes, your great aunt Ray Noma. Thank you for correcting Sean. She's not on the screen, but she is in the conversation. It's Dr. Vibe here. host and producer of the award-winning Dr. Vibe Show, the home of Epic Conversations. I'm the host of Epic Conversations, 2018 Innovation Award winner, handed out by the Canadian Ethnic Media Association. Want to thank Seanne. She's still here, but not on screen. Like to also thank Shannon. Like to also thank Bobby. Like to thank the great people at Get Vocal for providing this great platform to have these epic conversations. Anything else? I don't think so. So let's end it off with this. Live your life as a dream. If you can dream it, you can make it. Next up, sometimes you have to get smaller to get stronger. Block assumptions, and then aim bigger, aim better, aim higher, aim wider. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this epic conversation, live or on the replay. And we'll just take it out with the Dr. Vibe Show theme song that Seanne N. Murray knew the album, like just by listening to it for 30 seconds. So you know we're going to have her back. Be well, God bless, peace, well, and keep the faith. Bye-bye, everybody.